When a waiter at a high-end restaurant insulted a casually dressed black man, he thought no one would notice. But when the man's real identity came out, the entire room fell silent in shock. Soft conversations and the gentle clink of silverware echoed through the beautiful dining room of Lexington Terrace, one of the most expensive restaurants in Santa Monica. The place gave off an air of luxury. People wore fancy clothes, shiny watches sparkled under golden chandeliers, and the smell of warm, fresh sourdough filled the air. Here, appearances mattered. A lot. That evening, Elliot Bryant walked through the shiny glass doors. He was 38 years old, a successful tech entrepreneur who had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal that day. Dressed in dark jeans, a plain navy polo shirt, and worn-out sneakers, he didn't look like someone who belonged in a place like this. But Elliot didn't care about appearances. Tonight was about celebrating quietly, alone, with one of the best steaks in the city. He glanced around at the crisp white tablecloths and flickering candlelight. He wasn't here to show off. He was here for the food. He adjusted his simple watch, nothing flashy, and smiled politely as he stepped up to the hostess stand. The hostess, a young woman with neatly pinned-up hair, gave him a friendly smile and looked through the reservation list. "Ah, Mr. Bryant. Right this way," she said, picking up a menu and leading him to a cozy table by the window, one of the nicest spots in the restaurant. Elliot sat down, feeling at ease. The soft hum of voices and gentle music made the space feel warm and welcoming. He'd worked hard to get here, years of climbing the ladder, often being the only black man in boardrooms full of suits. Tonight, he just wanted to enjoy a quiet victory. But then, a shadow fell across the table. "Good evening," said a man wearing a sharp white shirt and black bow tie. His voice was cold and unfriendly. His name tag said, Kyle. He was tall, slim, and carried himself with a kind of arrogance that made Elliot sit up a little straighter. "Would you like some water to start?" Kyle asked stiffly. "Sure," Elliot replied calmly. "Still water, please." Kyle gave a quick nod but didn't smile. There was something in his face, a small sneer, a tightness in his mouth, that made it clear he wasn't thrilled to be serving Elliot. Without saying another word, Kyle walked away, leaving behind a strange tension. Elliot shook it off and turned his attention to the menu. The high prices didn't bother him, but he couldn't help chuckling to himself at the idea of paying $18 for a side of asparagus. Still, he had earned this meal, and he was going to enjoy it. Kyle returned with the water, but his attitude hadn't improved. He set the glass down too hard, splashing a bit of water. "Ready to order?" he asked, his voice clipped. "Not yet." "Can I have a few more minutes?" Elliot said. Kyle gave a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Take your time," he replied, thick with sarcasm, then turned and walked off. Elliot watched him leave, feeling something off about the whole exchange. Still, he wasn't here to argue. He took a sip of water and gazed out the window at the city lights. The night was still young, but under the fancy surface, something already felt wrong. He tried to push aside the awkwardness from the first encounter. He reminded himself he wasn't there to analyze someone's bad attitude. He just wanted a good meal. But as time passed, the feeling of being unwelcome started to settle in. Kyle seemed to have no issue with the other guests. Elliot watched him glide from table to table, smiling and speaking kindly. He even laughed warmly with the couple sitting nearby. When Kyle finally came back to Elliot's table, it felt like he had become a different person, cold and distant again. "Have you decided?" he asked, holding a pen over his notepad, still sounding annoyed. "I'll take the ribeye," Elliot said evenly. "Medium rare, and the garlic mashed potatoes on the side." Kyle jotted it down quickly without really looking at him. "Anything else? A glass of the house red, please." Kyle let out a small sigh, just loud enough to hear, then left without another word. Elliot leaned back in his seat and looked around. A few tables away, a group of loud, well-dressed men were laughing and joking. Their waiter didn't seem to mind. In fact, he was laughing right along with them, happily refilling their glasses. The difference in treatment was clear. When the bread basket finally arrived, Kyle dropped it carelessly onto the table. The edge nearly tipped over Elliot's water glass. "Your bread," he said flatly, and walked off again without waiting for a response. Elliot sighed. This wasn't new. He'd dealt with this kind of thing his whole life. The small jabs, the quiet reminders that some people didn't think he belonged. Still, it was disappointing every time. "Is everything all right, sir?" a voice asked. Elliot looked up. The hostess stood beside him, her warm smile breaking through his growing frustration. "Yes, everything's fine," he said, forcing a small smile. He didn't want to make a fuss, not tonight. But the uneasy feeling was growing, and he wasn't the only one who noticed. At the next table, an older woman with silver hair gave him a gentle, knowing look. It was as if she was silently saying, "I see what's going on." When Kyle returned with the steak, it felt like he was trying to push Elliot's buttons on purpose. He set the plate down with a loud thud, then poured the wine with so little care that a few drops splashed onto the clean white tablecloth. Elliot clenched his jaw, but kept his voice steady. "Thank you," he said. Kyle didn't reply, just gave a stiff nod and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of servers. At least the steak was as good as promised. Elliot took a bite, savoring the flavor. But the tension in the room was still thick. He noticed a few people glancing his way. Some looked curious. Others seemed uncomfortable. One man, sitting across the room with his family, mumbled something under his breath. His wife quickly elbowed him in the ribs. Elliot caught the moment. The quiet exchange ended with the man looking away, embarrassed. That was when Elliot decided he wasn't going to stay silent anymore. He usually didn't let small slights bother him, but something about this night felt different. As Kyle continued to ignore him, walking past his table like he wasn't even there, Elliot made up his mind. He raised his hand slightly as Kyle walked by, carrying a stack of plates with practiced ease. "Excuse me," Elliot said, his voice firm but polite. Kyle stopped, his face unreadable. "There's wine on the tablecloth," Elliot said, pointing to the dark red stain near his plate. "Can I get a napkin or something to clean it up?" Kyle stared at the stain for a second, then shrugged. "It's just a little spill. I'll send someone to handle it." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "That someone wouldn't be you?" "I'm busy," Kyle snapped, and walked off without another word. A couple at the next table shared a glance, clearly having overheard. Elliot caught their sympathetic looks, but didn't want pity. He quietly set down his fork and knife, staring out the window, wondering if finishing the meal was even worth it. Time passed. No one came to clean the spill. No one refilled his water. No one checked in on how his meal was going. It was like he'd become invisible. Elliot watched Kyle again. He moved easily between other tables, charming guests with a smile and friendly chatter. When someone cracked a joke, Kyle laughed loudly enough for half the room to hear. Elliot exhaled slowly, counting to 5. This wasn't new. He'd been judged by his appearance before, treated differently because of how he looked or what people assumed. But tonight wasn't over yet. From the corner of his eye, Elliot noticed a manager step out of the kitchen, clipboard in hand. He thought about flagging him down, but paused. Something told him it wasn't the right time. Not yet. Instead, he pulled out his phone and sent a quick message. "You wouldn't believe the service I'm getting at Lexington Terrace tonight." The reply came fast. "I'm 10 minutes away. Don't leave." Elliot smiled faintly and put the phone down. He didn't know for sure if that text would change anything. but he had a feeling it might. Kyle returned just as Elliot finished his last bite. "Anything else?" Kyle asked, voice flat. "Yes," Elliot said, locking eyes with him for the first time that night. "I'd like the check." Kyle nodded and left. A moment later, he came back with a sleek black folder and placed it on the table. Elliot opened it, and his hand froze. At the bottom of the bill, a message was scrawled by hand. "Dress code is business casual. Just FYI." Elliot blinked, reading the words twice. Then a third time. It wasn't part of the printed receipt. Kyle had written it himself. For a moment, everything around Elliot blurred. The quiet voices, the soft clinking of forks, the calm music in the background. It all felt far away. Elliot slowly closed the folder and looked up. Kyle was nearby, folding a napkin with fake calm, pretending not to care. Elliot had words ready. But before he could speak, a voice rang out from the entrance, loud, confident, and familiar. "Elliot!" Heads turned. A tall man in a sharp, tailored suit walked in with a wide smile on his face. And just like that, the whole energy in the room began to shift. Elliot turned toward the voice, a small smile forming on his face. Walking toward him was Nathan Caldwell, the owner of Lexington Terrace and a longtime friend. Nathan had a strong presence. Mid-40s, confident but not cocky, and the kind of person who had built this place into one of the city's most talked-about restaurants. He approached with open arms. "I didn't know you were coming tonight," he said, pulling Elliot into a quick hug. "You should have called. I'd have shut the whole place down for you." The warmth in Nathan's voice caught everyone's attention. The chatter in the room quieted. All eyes shifted to their table. Kyle, who had been standing nearby, suddenly stiffened. His face lost color as he realized what was happening. Elliot chuckled. "Didn't want to make a fuss," he said. "Just thought I'd drop in, enjoy a good meal, and celebrate a little." Nathan's smile faded as he glanced at the table. "Celebrate quietly, huh? What's this stain?" He looked at Kyle. "Where's the wine? Why hasn't this table been looked after properly?" Kyle stood frozen. I was just..." Nathan's eyes locked on him. "You were just what?" The room went still. Nathan's voice was calm but sharp. Elliot raised a hand, trying to ease the tension. "It's all right, Nathan. Just a small issue with the service, that's all." "A small issue?" Nathan repeated, narrowing his eyes. "I don't accept small issues, especially not with someone like you." He turned back to Kyle. "Do you even know who this man is?" Kyle blinked rapidly, clearly panicked. He didn't introduce himself," he muttered. Nathan let out a dry laugh. "He didn't introduce himself? Let me do it for him." He turned to the room, his voice loud and clear. "This is Elliot Bryant, the Elliot Bryant, founder of Bryant Tech Solutions. You know, the company that transformed the way logistics work in almost every major business in the country. The same man who's funded more youth programs and education centers than I can count." A wave of murmurs moved through the restaurant. People looked at Elliot again, this time with recognition and respect. Nathan wasn't finished. "And more than that, he's one of my closest friends. So tell me, Kyle, how have you been treating him?" Kyle's mouth opened, then closed. No sound came out. Elliot leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the server. His voice was calm, but there was power in every word. "This isn't about me being Nathan's friend. It's about how I was treated the moment I walked in. You saw me, made assumptions, and decided I wasn't worth your time. That's the issue." The entire room went quiet again. Even the sound of silverware seemed to stop. Nathan crossed his arms. "Well, Kyle, I'm still waiting." Kyle stumbled over his words. I didn't mean, it wasn't personal, I swear, I just..." "Exactly," Elliot said, cutting him off. His voice was firm now. "You just assumed. You looked at me, looked at what I was wearing, and made up your mind. Isn't that right?" Kyle said nothing. His silence said enough. Nathan's face grew stern. "This restaurant doesn't operate that way. Not from staff, not ever." He took a breath. "Kyle, we'll talk more later. But for now, you're done for the night." "Go." Kyle looked like he wanted to argue, but Nathan's expression shut that down fast. With his head down and hands shaking, he walked away, disappearing through the kitchen doors. Nathan turned back to Elliot, his voice softer now. "Elliot, I'm really sorry. This shouldn't have happened. I'll make sure it never does again." Elliot gave a small smile, but his words were serious. "It's not just about me. If it can happen to someone like me, it can happen to anyone. You can't have people like that on your team." Nathan nodded slowly. "You're right. I hear you, and I'll make it right." The room, which had been frozen during the confrontation, began to stir again. People whispered to each other. Some looked ashamed. Others simply looked at Elliot with quiet admiration. But Elliot didn't care about the attention. For him, the night wasn't about being recognized, and it definitely wasn't about revenge. It was never just about a spilled glass of wine. As Kyle vanished into the back, Nathan signaled to another server. A young woman hurried over, her demeanor the complete opposite of Kyle's, attentive, respectful, and eager to make things right. "Let's get you a fresh tablecloth," Nathan said, gently resting a hand on Elliot's shoulder. "And another glass of wine. On the house. Anything you need tonight, it's yours." But Elliot shook his head with a quiet smile. "I appreciate it, Nathan. But this was never about a tablecloth or a glass of wine." Nathan nodded slowly, understanding. The weight of Elliot's words landed heavy. "Then let's fix it," Nathan said. "Not just for you. For anyone who walks through that door." As the staff reset the table, quiet conversation stirred across the room. Some guests looked visibly uncomfortable, caught reflecting on their own assumptions. Others looked embarrassed, their eyes avoiding Elliot's. Elliot's voice broke through the murmurs. Calm, low, but sharp. "I didn't come here to make a scene," he said. "But maybe this scene needed to happen. Too many people walk into places like this and leave feeling like they don't belong. Judged, misunderstood, the moment they arrive." Nathan frowned, ashamed. "You're right. And that's not the kind of place I want to run. It starts with accountability, and I'll make sure it does." From across the room, an older woman rose from her seat and walked over. Her silver hair caught the chandelier light as she approached Elliot with a kind smile. "Mr. Bryant," she said gently, "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to say how much I admire the way you handled yourself tonight. With grace, with dignity. I don't know that I could have done the same." Elliot's smile was soft, but meaningful. "Thank you, ma'am. Sometimes dignity's all we have, and I don't let anyone take that from me." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Well, we'll be following your work now. Closely. Thank you for tonight's lesson." As she returned to her table, others began to clap. Quietly at first, then louder. The sound spread across the room, not as a celebration, but a show of respect. Nathan looked at Elliot, his voice thick with emotion. "You've given me a lot to think about, my friend. I owe you more than an apology." But Elliot stopped him with a raised hand. "I'm not here for favors, Nathan. Just do what's right. Make this place welcoming. For everyone. Whether they walk in wearing a suit or sneakers." "You have my word," Nathan replied. "And Kyle, he won't be returning. This place has standards, and respect is non-negotiable." Elliot believed him, but he also knew this wasn't just about one server or one night. It was about something much deeper. The silent assumptions people carry, the quiet ways they make others feel small. He stood, folded his napkin, and placed it on the table. "Thank you, Nathan. Tonight wasn't perfect. But it mattered." As he walked toward the door, the room watched him, not with curiosity, but with admiration. And maybe, just maybe, some of them would leave thinking a little differently. Because for Elliot, it was never about being admired. It was about being seen. Outside, the night air was cool against his skin. Elliot paused beneath the Lexington Terrace sign, glowing softly above him. For years, this place had been a symbol of status and exclusivity. But tonight, it became something else. A mirror. Moments later, Nathan joined him outside, hands stuffed deep into his coat pockets. "I just wanted to say one more thing," he said. "You shouldn't have had to deal with that. Not here. Not anywhere. And the way you held yourself, I'm not sure I could have done it." Elliot looked over at him, his expression gentle. "Nathan, it's not about handling it better. It's about making sure the next person doesn't have to handle it at all. That's the change I want." Nathan nodded. "Then that's what I'll work toward." "I promise," Elliot placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Good. Because this isn't just about your restaurant. It's about the kind of world we want to live in." As Nathan went back inside, Elliot pulled out his phone and typed a message. Tonight wasn't the celebration I had planned, but it was a reminder. Why the fight for respect still matters. A reply came back almost instantly. "Proud of you, man. Let's celebrate properly tomorrow." Elliot smiled, slid the phone into his pocket, and began walking down the quiet street. Behind him, the hum of the city faded into the night. He knew the evening had left a mark, not just on him, but on everyone who saw what happened. Inside, Nathan stood in front of his staff. "What happened tonight will never happen again," he said. "Not in this restaurant. Not under my name. We're going to be better." And Kyle, his departure was swift. Final. A clear message. Prejudice has no place where excellence is expected. For Elliot, this night wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about putting someone in their place. It was about something bigger. The quiet power of standing tall when you're being looked down on. The unshakable dignity of knowing your worth, regardless of how others see you. And the reminder that real change doesn't come from shouting. It comes from showing people who you are and never backing down. Because appearances can lie. But respect? That should never depend on how you look. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been in Elliot's shoes, leave a comment below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that shine a light on truth, character, and the change we all deserve to see.